are rumors that a secret, haunted children's cemetery exists at the bottom of the slope where two walls meet on the Ravenskrug property. This area is popular with psychics and paranormal investigators, and often mysterious people can be seen there at night conducting strange rituals, sometimes involving votive candles. Rumor has it they sometimes hear disembodied children crying. Survivors of horrific brainwashing experiments claim that child victims were secretly buried at this location, out of sight from the public. Ravenskrug is a prominent Pine Avenue mansion that is currently used as McGill's psychiatry department. It is a very creepy estate and is rumored to be haunted. Not only do caretakers often refuse to clean the terrifying morgues in the building, but sometimes at night a mysterious light appears in the cupola of the main tower overlooking the McGill campus. Mental health patients are often apprehensive about being treated here, and for good reason. Ravenskrug was built in 1863 by Sir Hugh Allen, an extremely affluent banker and entrepreneur of Scottish origin. Allen used his political connections to obtain favorable contracts and subsidies for his enterprises and was known to exploit workers, including children in his factories. After Allen's death in 1882, his son Montague inherited the regal Ravenskrug mansion. In 1940, following Montague's death, his wife donated it to McGill University. Ravenskrug was transformed into a psychiatric hospital called the Allen Memorial Institute, with funds from the Rockefeller Foundation. Dr. Ewan Cameron, the founder of McGill's psychiatric department, was appointed its director. In the early 1950s, during the first decade of the Cold War, the CIA believed it was crucial to learn how to brainwash people after the apparent success of the Chinese during the Korean War of making American pals make inexplicable confessions. The CIA reached out to psychologists, physicians and toxicologists and embarked on several mind control experiments, including Project MKUltra. The CIA managed to recruit Dr. Ewan Cameron of McGill University. The purpose of the brainwashing techniques were to destroy a person's time-space continuum in order to reprogram them. Starting in 1950, the CIA reached out to psychologists, physicians and toxicologists and embarked on several mind control projects, such as Project Bluebird, Project Artichoke, and Project MKUltra. The CIA managed to recruit Dr. Ewan Cameron of McGill University. The purpose of the brainwashing techniques were to destroy a person's time-space continuum in order to reprogram them. Cameron and his colleague Dr. Hebb started off with 22 paid student volunteers. Cameron placed them on a bed in a lighted cubicle and made them wear opaque goggles, cardboard handcuffs and lie with their head embedded into a U-shaped foam pillow that limited audio stimulation. Most subjects quit after a few hours, remarking that being in the apparatus felt like a form of torture. Most also had experienced hallucinations similar to those had on drugs like LSD. Dr. Hebb concluded that even short-term sensory deprivation produced a devastating impact on the human psyche, noting that the subject's very identity began to disintegrate. Realizing the potential, Cameron moved the research trial to Phase 2, which would require subjects who could not leave, as the student volunteers had done. Cameron began handpicking patients at the Allen Memorial Institute for participation in the brainwashing research, against their knowledge. For subjects, Dr. Cameron chose people suffering from minor mental and emotional problems, like anxiety disorders or postpartum depression. Dr. Ewan Cameron developed and tested 3 major psychiatric procedures on the mental patients at the Allen Memorial. He started with the technique of depatterning, his theory that people's patterns of behavior could be erased and replaced with others. In an attempt to erase their memories, Dr. Cameron subjected them to brutal electroshock sessions that were well beyond the norm in psychiatric hospitals in terms of frequency, duration and voltage. His second technique was called sensory isolation and involved putting subjects in a sealed box where they would receive the minimum sensorial stimulus possible. Their eyes and ears would be covered, their body would be padded, and their movement impeded. It induced a form of sleep deprivation and disintegration of the personality. Dr. Cameron then used his third technique, which was known as psychic driving. Using powerful drugs, he would put patients through 15 to 30 days of drug-induced, almost uninterrupted sleep as patients were forced them to listen to pre-recorded messages on a loop for as many as 16 hours a day, designed to implant the desired new personality in the patient's psyche. Dr. Cameron was largely successful in erasing the identity of his patients, but was unable to implant the desired new personalities. Many of them suffered permanent brain damage. A study commissioned by Cameron's successor in 1967 found that many of the tested patients suffered permanent amnesia, incontinence, forgetting how to talk, forgetting their parents, and even thinking their interrogators were their parents. There were also allegedly several deaths. The CIA was so impressed that these techniques became the core of its torture methodology and were used, most recently, in Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq and at Guantanamo Bay. Most of Dr. Cameron's unconsenting human guinea pigs did not discover what had really been done to them until more than 20 years later, which made it very difficult to obtain compensation. A few of Cameron's over 300 former patients did file lawsuits, but they were obstructed by the Canadian government, which had also contributed to the financing of Cameron's experiments. The reason Dr. Cameron was able to carry out such cruel experiments for almost a decade could be explained by the prestige that he enjoyed as a doctor. He was one of North America's most eminent psychiatrists. He had served in the medical tribunal at the Nuremberg trials and had been the president of the Quebec, Canadian, American, and World Psychiatric Associations. One survivor of Hugh and Cameron's experiments named Anne Diamond suggests that there are unmarked graves in the area behind the Allen Memorial Institute. She wrote, "These unmarked graves are a big secret. There has been no physical proof that kids are buried there but ... Some would have been First Nations kids in Cameron's experiments between 1953 and 1964. Others came from broken homes, or were orphans. Obviously, they're not laid out to attract attention, but we think 1725 children were buried there. Officially, though, it never happened. Many records were destroyed, however, and McGill has been very busy hiding the evidence and making sure witnesses and survivors remain silent. Whether or not these are the ramblings of a damaged woman or if there are indeed children buried down there is open to speculation. Only one thing is certain. Until someone goes down there with a shovel or a spade and starts digging, this is one mystery that will remain unsolved.